I never once feared for his life. I think that was just because didn't have the knowledge. I just knew that the doctors would be able to figure things out and that he wasn't at risk of dying. So I had a lot of peace around that, but just a lot of sadness about the, natural birth that had been taken from me and just the kind of horror of having to leave your baby behind in the hospital. All right, welcome back to the Breastfeeding Diaries. This episode is going to be my story. So I have been planning on sharing my story at some point. I think for those who know me, then you kind of know my story and what got me really into being an advocate for breastfeeding and for lactation. But for those who don't necessarily know my full story, I wanted to share that, and hopefully you guys will be encouraged by my story as well as all of the other stories that you've gotten here on the show. So let me go ahead and get comfortable here and jump in. This is actually my second time recording this because the first time my dog decided to bark through the whole thing and ruin the audio. So we're trying again, and this is it. And I'm just hoping that the Lord will speak through me and that the second time around will be exactly what needed to be said to begin with. So I had two babies. I'm going to share first with you the story about my first, and then I think in a future episode we will share about my second. And then I'm also thinking about kind of breaking up some things that I talk about into some tips and things like that. I really do want to talk about some sleep scheduling, sleep training concepts as it relates to breastfeeding eventually. So that'll be a future podcast. But since my story with my firstborn really has a lot to do with transitioning from the NICU, I'm going to focus on that in this episode and give you guys hopefully a few tips and some things that I experienced and just kind of my thoughts on all of that. So going into my story, I had planned fully on breastfeeding. When I found out I was pregnant with my first, I had scheduled or planned to do a birth with a birth center and a midwife. So that was going to be very supportive of breastfeeding and very conducive to that. It was going to be this all natural, unmedicated birth. We were going to have that golden hour, have the skin to skin, all of the things that was just going to be, promoting breastfeeding. And I had also planned on returning to work after 8 weeks. So I had put in through insurance to order a pump and had not actually ordered it yet. I had just plugged in my insurance information and didn't really research, didn't really know anything about breastfeeding. I just kind of assumed, like a lot of moms do, that it would be easy. My mom did it with me and my siblings all the way through 12 months. She also worked part-time and pumped and all the things, so I just assumed that that would be easy. And then, had no training, no experience, didn't go to any classes or anything. And then at 31 weeks, everything seemed to be going well with the pregnancy, but at 31 weeks, my water broke in the middle of the night, and I had to go to the hospital immediately. So we went from planning this birth center birth to then having to transfer to the hospital. My midwife was just like, go straight there. If your water broke, you're going to have the baby early, and he's going to have to go to the NICU. And I didn't even realize I knew 40 weeks was full term, but I didn't know anything about preterm babies at all. I just thought 31 weeks, he would be normal. I thought maybe he'd be a bit small, but that everything would be fine. I thought that I could just go through with labor and just have him hopefully, naturally in the hospital. But as each thing kind of unfolded, it was like we were just being swept through a series of here's what's going to happen next and just kind of being told what was going to happen. and nothing went like I planned. So I check into the hospital, and at 31 weeks, they give you magnesium. So if anyone has had experienced a premature birth, they do try to keep you from going into labor if possible. So they gave me magnesium. They gave me a steroid that was supposed to help his lungs and his brain. And then after 48 hours on steroid, on the magnesium, which wasn't as bad as some people say. It kind of does make you feel like really hot. Some people say it makes you feel like you're on fire, but I didn't really feel any of that. I didn't really feel like nauseous or anything. I definitely felt loopy, like on drugs loopy. And then after the 48 hours, they were like, okay, we're going to try and just keep you pregnant until 34 weeks. So you have 3 weeks to just chill in the hospital and just try not to go into labor. So I got all settled in just to have like a long stay, and even got my work computer and was planning on working, which HR wasn't very happy about. So you're not really supposed to work in the hospital, I guess. And so that was, 31 weeks. So I went into the hospital on a Thursday, and then that following Wednesday got myself all set up to work. And about halfway through the day, I noticed some blood when I went to the bathroom. And then I grabbed the nurse and I was like, hey, I saw some blood. Can y'all check me out? She was like, let me grab the doctor. So he doesn't come in for like 3 hours and nothing changes. Like everything seems like it's fine. And of course my water was broke at this point. So I'm just like constantly like leaking fluid. Well, my doctor comes and he's like, hey, can you like change clothes and then I'll check you. And when I started to change clothes, there was just like blood gushing out. So I knew that something was probably wrong. And then the doctor was like, he didn't even really like get up in there, check anything. He was just like, okay, we need to get this baby out. And I was like, well, what are my options here? Like, can we just like wait it out and check him in the morning, see if he's okay? And he was like, no, I think if you do that, you'll wake up in a pool of blood and there's a lot of risks here. And I was like, okay, what are the risks? What are the benefits? What happens if we don't do it? He was like, well, if we don't do it, the risks are maternal death and fetal death. And I was like, okay, do the C-section. So called my husband. He was actually at work because we thought I was just going to be stuck in the hospital. So what was he supposed to do? So he drives over to the hospital. And within 45 minutes, I was taken back for a C-section. And I think I did like pretty good, but just like mentally, I was like freaking out. And I talk out loud when I'm freaked out. So I just kept saying like, I can't feel my legs. I can't feel my legs. And they were like, that's okay. You're not supposed to be able to feel your legs. And like while they were cutting me open, I was just like thrashing around and just panicking, not handling it very well, I would say. But I mean, how many people do when you have an unplanned C-section? And then they were like, how many pounds do you think he's going to be? And they had also warned us that he probably was not going to be able to breathe, that at 32 weeks, their lungs are just not fully developed. So just expecting that. And I was like, I think he's going to be like 3 pounds. Because that's what all my little apps said, you know? And so then they were like, they pulled him out and they held him up over the curtain and he started crying right away. So we knew that his lungs were working. And then they were like, he's actually 4 pounds, 6 ounces. So he actually did not need to have any breathing support. He was taken back to the NICU and he didn't need any breathing support. He just needed a feeding tube and an IV, some antibiotics, and a little bit of caffeine. That's what they give the preemies in the NICU just for like the first couple of days to remind them to breathe. And I don't think he needed that for more than a day. But anyway, so I got the C-section. I was taken to a recovery room for like 2 hours maybe. And so I didn't really get to hold my baby until about 3 hours later. And it wasn't skin to skin, of course. It was just wrapped up in all the wires and swaddled up to keep him warm and everything. So that was when I finally got to hold him. It was like 7 p.m. that night. And then after that, they took me back, to recover and everything, and like take out the catheter and help me start walking again. All of those things, which it was just all so traumatic. And just throughout everything, I really hated that feeling of vulnerability and that feeling like I was out of control and powerless. And it was really, the first time I'd experienced something like that, because, I was young and healthy and everything, and I never experienced a hospitalization or had to experience this major surgery. I did have collarbone surgery, but that really wasn't nearly as bad as a C-section. And so then throughout all of that, I'm like, okay, so when do I start pumping? Because I'm like, oh my gosh, golden hour, first latch, like I have got to start pumping so I can have milk. And I'm thinking the whole time, like, what if I don't have any milk at all? And I've never done this, so I have no idea what's going to happen. And they brought a Medela hospital grade pump. The nurse was very young, single, didn't have kids. And so she's over there trying to show me how to pump, and I'm just trying to trust her. Because at this point, like, I didn't get to see anyone from lactation because it was the end of the day. So got hooked up to the pump and everything, and just started pumping every 3 hours. So that was really painful and miserable, like having to get up every 3 hours. And they had told me that walking was good with a C-section. I needed to kind of get up and stretch out and not just like lay there. And I had a lot of shoulder pain that they called it gas pain. So that was really weird. But if you ever have a C-section and you're like, why is my shoulder hurting? That doesn't make any sense. But I had that. And so the first night, just pumped every 3 hours, not a single drop, which, of course, not knowing that that's kind of normal because you have colostrum and it's just very thick. And that's totally normal. Plus, I'd had all of the drugs from the C-section running through me. I think the Pitocin that they gave me probably was supposed to help kind of kickstart things because that's kind of mimicking the oxytocin from labor. But all the other drugs and stuff, and then of course not being around my baby. And so every time I'm pumping, I'm getting one drop, pumping for 20 minutes, and it's very painful. And then the next day, I would take all my pump parts and put them in the little wheelchair and roll myself. I guess the first day people wheeled me around, but then the second day I actually walked down to the NICU, which was, just around the hallway from labor and delivery. So I would walk over there and hold my baby, and that feeling, I forgot to say this, but the moment when I got to first hold him, when he put him against my chest, that was such an amazing feeling. It felt like my heart was breaking, but also a really happy, beautiful moment, but just felt this sadness of knowing like the way that he came into the world was so crazy. I never once feared for his life. I think that was just because I didn't have the knowledge. But throughout all of it, like after my water broke and everything, I just knew that the doctors would be able to figure things out and that he wasn't at risk of dying. So I had a lot of peace around that, but just a lot of sadness about the natural birth that had been taken from me, and just the kind of horror of having to leave your baby behind in the hospital, and seeing your baby just so tiny and hooked up to things. And he seemed kind of healthy to me at the time, but when I look back at videos and pictures, it's like he was so skinny and frail and fragile. And of course, we were saying the whole time, like, you're so strong, sweet boy, you're so strong. But I would look back at those videos and photos, and he just was so lethargic and weak and just, struggling, like, what has happened to me? I remember, I think the second day, he was sitting there crying, and none of the nurses were coming to tend to him. And we were just sitting there, just kind of letting him cry. And I took this video, and it's just me and my husband sitting there while he cries. And looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, why did I just let him cry? Like, why didn't I try to hold him or comfort him or anything? But I just didn't know how to be a parent, and I was just in so much shock. So I took that video, and that actually ended up being a good thing, because when we went home, I had that video to listen to while I pumped. So I got myself a little pump station in the nursery, and I would just like sit in this chair in the middle of the night, and I would have a little blanket from the NICU to smell, and I would watch that video of him crying. So the second day I'm home, and I'm still only getting one drop when I pump. And the middle of the night on that second day, so I think we're about 48 hours in, I just started to feel really hopeless. And I was just like, Lord, am I supposed to breastfeed? Like, please let there be some milk. He was getting donor milk in the NICU. If they're under 33 weeks, they get donor milk. So that was a blessing. But so I knew he was getting fed. I just wanted it to be for me. And so the middle of the night, I just prayed, cried out to God, and was like, please, Lord, if I'm going to get it some milk, like, please let there be more milk. Maybe I'd give it another 24 hours, I'm thinking, before I give up, which, you know, was way too soon, but I didn't know that. So we go to the NICU the next day. So this is day 3, and I finally get to do skin to skin. So his clothes are off. He's in nothing but a diaper against my chest. And after that, I pumped, and I finally got milk. I got 5 milliliters of golden colostrum. And I was just like, yes, I can do it. I can do this. So after that, just kept on going, kept on pumping. And from 32 weeks when he was born until 33 weeks, he was not allowed to try any type of oral feeding. He was only using the tube. And they said after 33 weeks, that's supposedly when, while they're in the womb, they learn how to suck, swallow, and breathe. So they didn't even let him try before that. They would put a Pepsi in his mouth, let him kind of try sucking. But they wouldn't even let him try bottles or nursing. And so then at 33 weeks, I was there in the NICU with him when they said, let's go ahead and try nursing. So I got to nurse him for the first time, and lactation helped me and everything. We used a nipple shield because he was so tiny. And that seemed to actually go pretty good. But of course he fell asleep, which, I mean, he's so tiny and lethargic. Even full-term babies fall asleep while eating. So, but the kind of rules in the NICU are they cannot go home before 35 weeks. So that's rule number 1. Rule number 2 is they had to be over a certain weight, which I think was close to between 5 and 6 pounds, I think. So he had kind of already hit that marker pretty early on. And then the third rule is that they have to be taking all of their feeds 100% for 24 hours. So those were the 3 things he had to do to get out. So we hit week 33. So he's there 1 week. Then about that time, I had to return my hospital pump that I had borrowed. And I was using this random, it's called the Motif Duo. It's a portable pump that I had ordered, and I'd return the hospital pump, but I got this Motif Duo, and it did not work, like, at all. Did not get even a drop of milk. I was like, okay, I can use that. So I went back to my Medela stuff, and I used a hand pump, and it was the hand pump that attached to the hospital pump. So it actually was kind of like a crank, like a bicycle pump. And I had to use that for like 2 days. So every single pump, every 3 hours, I'm just sitting there like cranking this pump. Just so miserable, but also like, I'm going to power it through and do this because I was just determined. I think that's really what it was. I was determined. Like, I didn't want me to be the reason that I stopped. Like, anything else could make me stop, but not me. So I was determined to do it. And so we hit 33 weeks, hit 34. And throughout all this time, like, as my milk supply starts to go up, but it's still really not much, I was getting about 40 to 80 milliliters. So a little more than 2 ounces. So between 1.5 and 2.5 ounces about. So not really like a full supply, if you think about it. So that's every 3 hours, 8 times a day. So 8 times about 2. It's only 16 ounces. It's really not a full supply. Like a full supply is typically 24 to 32 ounces every 24 hours. That's kind of a standard. Now, there's more or less, obviously, but kind of considered like your average supply and what your average baby needs for breast milk is 24 to 32 ounces. So I guess don't quote me on that because I think I read that from some lactation specialist, but, and I don't know if I said this, but I did see lactation one time while he was in the NICU, but I also followed a lot of pumping accounts. So during this time on Instagram, I started following Be My Breast Friend, one with the pump, Carrie Locker, however you say it. I should probably know how to say this, so I'm doing a breastfeeding podcast. Names like that. And I had found a few friends on Instagram who said that they had exclusively pumped or that they had a successful experience with pumping, and they had told me about those resources. So I have all those resources. I'm looking at those 24/7 round the clock on Instagram. So I'm feeling very encouraged by that. And then, so he hits 33 weeks. He's able to nurse, start on bottles, 34 weeks, 35 weeks. So after 35 weeks, it's like, okay, he can go home now, but he still wasn't finishing his bottles. So sometimes, I'd be there in the NICU and I would try nursing him, but we just felt like it would be faster and better for him if he just did bottles for the time being. And because nursing was hard for him. And so we were like, we just got to get him out of here. Let's just do bottles. And so kept doing that. And then finally at, I believe it was 36 weeks because he was in there for 26 days. So almost 36 weeks when he finished all of his bottles and he got to go home. So the NICU transition is very, very hard because you go from, in some ways, there's good things. So one good thing I think is that I got to recover from my C-section without having a baby needing me and demanding on me 24/7. But on the negative side, I had to walk to the car and go up to the NICU so many times. So that was, not super restful. And you just can't rest without your baby. Being that it was my first baby, it was probably better that I experienced it that way because I didn't know what I was missing out on. And neither did my husband. Like, we really didn't know. We didn't feel like we were parents until we brought him home. So it was just 4 really weird weeks where you don't feel like you're a parent. We would go to the grocery store and I just felt so weird because, I still had kind of a big belly, like from being postpartum. And I just wanted to tell people, like, because I wanted to have my baby with me. I wanted people to know that I had a baby. So I would literally, like, at the checkout line at the grocery store, be talking to a random stranger and be like, I have a baby, by the way. I have a baby. Guys, I have a baby. Hey, did you know I have a baby? I have a baby. He's actually 4 weeks old or 3 weeks old, and he's in the NICU. He was born early. He's in the NICU. I would just tell random people because I just needed everyone to know. Like, we went back to church after 2 weeks, and I would see people be like, guys, I have a baby. I promise you, he's in the NICU. I had the baby. He's in the NICU. So lots of people were praying for us and taking care of us and everything. So we were definitely not alone. Then we finally get to take him home, and my plan with nursing was we would use the nipple shield and we would nurse, try to do 15 minutes on each side, and then offer him a 1 ounce bottle. And the lactation consultants and the nurses said, if he drinks less than that 1 ounce bottle, then you'll know that he got enough from the breast. So we were doing that, and so he comes home on like a Tuesday, I believe. So the rest of that week was just feeding him every 3 hours. He never woke up on his own. We had to wake him up every time. Feeding him every 3 hours, 15 minutes on each side with the nipple shield, trying to keep him awake through all of that. and offering him the 1 ounce bottle. And then that Sunday, we decided to just give him a bottle, and I was going to just pump. Well, I pump again with that little motif pump that I had gotten, and I get nothing. Like a couple of drops. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I don't have any milk. Like, I probably dried up. I don't have any milk. And that was really the moment when I was like, I think I'm gonna give up. Like, I was just panicking. Like, I probably dried up. And you hear so many stories of people losing their milk supply or drying up, and there's always more to the story, but I just thought it was just this sudden crazy thing that happens to you where you just dry up. So I'm thinking, this is it. This is when I dry up. So I booked with lactation, so it was about a week after he got out of the NICU. We go to the lactation counselor, and prior to this, I had seen lactation one other time, and they said that since, my flanges were hurting me when I pumped, that I probably needed to go up a size. So I was using a 27 millimeter Medela flange. Well, I go to this lactation appointment, and this lactation counselor is amazing. We do a weighted feed, and it turns out Owen got a little over 1 ounce on each side, so almost 3 ounces. And he's still tiny. He came home at 6 pounds. So he's super tiny. In a bottle, he's doing around 60 milliliters maybe, so a little over 2 ounces. So he really does not need that much at this point. Well, she is helping me get all set up with the nipple shield, and she's like, oh girl, your nipples are not that big. You need to be using this. And she holds up a 16 millimeter nipple shield. So it turns out I was using a 27 millimeter flange, and I only actually have, to this day, I have a 15 millimeter. So much smaller than what comes in the pack. So that's one of my biggest things that so many lactation counselors say and harp on, but you just have to keep harping on it over and over because it's so true. The flanges come in packs usually of 20, 24, 27. That is not how big most women's nipples are. Most women need more like a 15, 16, 17, 19 millimeter. Maybe the 20, but most women are not as big as the normal size that the flange comes in. So, learn that lesson. At this point, I had been getting tips from people on Instagram to get a Spectra pump, so I'd ordered that and just paid for that myself. I thought, the cost was worth it. I'd already used up my pump from insurance with that other pump that wasn't really working for me. And then after that lactation counselor meeting, I was like, that was the turning point for me. That was the point where I was like, I can do this. I can trust my milk. He is getting enough. Before that, I'd been offering him a 1 ounce bottle after feeds, and sometimes he would finish it, sometimes not. But after that appointment, I said, nope, we're not doing that anymore. We got rid of that bottle. And that's really my biggest, I think, tip for transitioning out of the NICU is you can't go into it supplementing with formula 100% or 50, however much percent. Whatever you go into it supplementing with formula, especially early on, is going to replace your milk. So later on, I think, so after your milk supply regulates, let's say you were 5 months postpartum and maybe you switched one feed out for formula. That might be doable long term. You might be able to go all the way to 12 months with, 1 bottle a day with formula, or adding 1 ounce of formula onto several bottles. But as soon as you introduce supplementing, you're telling your body, baby doesn't need more, baby needs less. So your body's going to make a little bit less, and then a little bit less, and then a little bit less. So coming out home from the NICU, you really have to nurse the baby as much as possible. And there's kind of 2 ways you can do it. You can nurse them first and then do a bottle so that they obviously fill up as much as possible on you. And then another way that we kind of did sometimes in the NICU was the bottle first and then nursing, so that they associated fullness with nursing. I'm not really sure that was a good method though, because you really want to extract milk so that your body knows to make more milk. So I think having him on that 3-hour schedule, we really stuck to that. And then if we needed to adjust the schedule, we would feed at like 2 hours or 2.5 hours. So I think that really helped keeping us like regular and on schedule. He was so sleepy, so lethargic. Like he would never wake up on his own until his due date. And then after his due date, he started to wake up from naps or wake up in the middle of the night on his own, you know. And so we also did sleep training, which I'll kind of save for another episode. We did Baby Wise. And so the methodology there is feed, wake, sleep, which I also found very helpful for building milk supply because it's very routine, and it just gives you confidence that if the baby's crying and it's not feeding time, then they're probably crying for some other reason. So a lot of times people just assume, oh, baby's crying, baby's hungry, oh, I don't have enough milk. But because of the methodology that we were doing, knowing that, okay, if I just fed him 20 minutes ago, he's probably not crying because he's hungry. He's probably crying because he's sleepy or because he has some gas or he needs a diaper or something. And it's like, typically it's just sleepy because early on they can get overtired so easily, which just dissolves them into tears. So that was a big thing. Another big thing was right around the time of his due date. So at this point, remember, he came 8 weeks early, so he's already 2 months old. My parents came out to visit and just be with us. And during that time, I got the courage to go out with the baby and like go out to like restaurants and shopping and things like that. And when he would cry, my parents were so confident. Of course, I was like, oh my gosh, he's crying. I don't want anybody here crying. And, you know, people are going to want us to leave. My parents were just so chill when he would cry. And, or he woke up early from a nap. They're like, here, you know, here's a pacifier. And just very relaxed about it. And they also were just very much like, you need to trust your milk. You can trust your milk. Both my parents, my dad included, they were like, just trust your milk, feed, wake, sleep. And if he wakes up from his nap, then you just feed him. And that's how you know it's time to eat, is he woke up from his nap. And if he woke up early, then he's hungry and he needs more milk. So having that confidence. Another thing that was really helped me was something my husband would say. He would say, babies cry, babies cry. And I would just freak out, be like, oh my gosh, why is he crying? Why is he crying? And would just be like, well, babies cry. And it's like, yeah, that's something that babies do. It doesn't mean that they have this going on or this going on, or, you know, you have to reconfigure their whole world because they were crying. So those voices of my parents and then also my husband were really, really helpful during that postpartum period. I probably got a little bit of the baby blues, but I think a lot of it was just like I'm very extroverted, so being like stuck at home was very hard for me. And then just having that experience of him being in the NICU, I didn't feel bonded to him. One way that I know wasn't really bonded to him is like, you know, when my parents came, or when they came and visited him in the NICU, when we would leave him, they would get very emotional and be like, oh, we miss him so much, we miss him so much. And I didn't feel that at all. Like, I missed him, but I didn't feel like crying when I left the NICU. When it came time to go back to work, it was not hard for me at all. I dropped him off at daycare and I was like, bye, because here he is crying and screaming all day, and just he wouldn't smile or anything. So I just didn't have that feedback that said that I was a good mom. So I went back to work, and my coworkers were like, oh, how are you doing? Is it just so hard to leave your baby? I'm like, no, it's really not that hard. Like, I'm fine. I'm very happy for someone else to deal with his crying. And at work, it's like, at work, I know how to be successful. I know how to get a gold star. I am an expert. I am skilled in what I do. At home with this crying baby, I'm not the expert. I don't get a gold star. I just get more crying. And so for me, going back to work was just fine. And I wasn't like super bonded to him. And like breastfeeding was great, and I do think that helps with the bond. But for me, the thing that really locked that bond into place was when he smiled. So he finally smiled at 16 weeks, and he finally smiled, and that was when it was like, I can't be away from you. I think my husband had planned a date night like a couple days after he smiled, and we were dropping him off with my in-laws, and he was smiling, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't leave. I can't go on this date. I need to be with him. So for me, especially as a first-time mom, like with the first baby, I needed that smile to know that I was doing a good job. And of course, like looking back, I'm like, oh, that was a great time. I got to cuddle with him. He was so sweet. But in the moment, I was like, why isn't he growing up? Why isn't he talking and interacting with me? Why isn't he crawling? Why isn't he doing all these things? And so now with my second baby, I just enjoy all the snuggles. But at the time, when Owen was so tiny, I just was ready for him to move on to the next thing. So another little milestone in our breastfeeding journey was at 5 months. Again, we were hanging out with my parents. You could tell they were really a big part of my journey. But we went to a Renaissance festival with them. So in order to nurse him while we were out and about, I had my nipple shield, I had a travel nursing pillow, and then I had a nursing cover. I also got a nursing cover that has like a little wire thing that kind of makes the neck poof out so that you can look down easier. Because the regular nursing covers, it would like cover him so I couldn't see. And because it was so difficult to latch him, I really needed a very clear view. So that was one of the first times where I really had to like nurse him in public a lot. So we go to the Renaissance Festival, and he still has to eat like every 3 hours. So we're at these different areas of the Renaissance Festival, and my mom and my husband are helping me, getting me all set up, and then I would switch sides, and it was like 15 minutes on each side, and it was just so great. And then I remember one point we went to go watch a joust, and it was really, really hot and humid, and I start to go and feed him, and he's like drenched in sweat. I'm drenched in sweat. I go to put the nursing cover on, and I'm like, you know what? We don't need a cover. Like, we're in a joust. Like, if there any other place where, I think it's okay that there's boobs out, is a joust. So I took off the cover and I nursed him. And then later in the day, we were still out at this thing, and it started raining. And I nursed him in the rain. So that was the moment when I was just like, I'm a breastfeeding goddess. Like, I can totally do this. And I loved it. I was just like, I love doing this. I'm totally fine nursing in public. Feeding on a schedule kind of helps with that, because it was like, I know I need to sit down and do 15 minutes on each side, and I know that he's going to eat at a certain time. So if I really, really want to be alone, I can go out to the car, or I can adjust my plans around that schedule. Or just knowing like, hey, my baby's going to eat at this time, and there's no shame in a baby getting his food. Like, there's no shame in pulling out a bottle. Why is there shame in pulling out your breast? So, not to say that I was like immodest or anything. Like, definitely tried to kind of keep things modest, or use a cover if I needed to, or wear the right clothing that was easier to maneuver. But also having that freedom of like, if he's going to kick off the cover, then just too bad. He's going to have to eat. So that was a really big milestone. I went back to work. I used the Spectra pump, and I would get 2 to 3 ounces per pump. And our routine was pretty much wake up, nurse him at 7 a.m., pump at 9:30 a.m., pump at 12, pump again at like 2:30, and then nurse him at 5 when I got home. Nurse him again at bedtime, like 7:30 or 8. And then when he was younger, I would do a dream feed at like 11 p.m. and then he would sleep until 6 or 7 a.m. So that was our routine. And our pediatrician was great. I wouldn't say he was like he wasn't like, woohoo, breastfeeding, but he never once suggested formula. Owen stayed small. Like, he continued to grow, but he stayed very small. Like, he was 12 pounds at a year old. So he stayed very small, but his doctor really didn't mind. He never pushed anything, never pushed formula. We waited until 6 months to start solids, and that was a little bit hard because he couldn't sit upright, but he loved purees. So he was like slouched over in his high chair, like we were supporting him with blankets and rolled up towels and things, and he loved purees so much, just loved food. And at that point, he really loved nursing too. I had tried to wean him from the nipple shield, but had a lot of trouble with that. I even went back to lactation, and I just really struggled with latching him correctly without the nipple shield, and it hurt too. So then at about 7 months old, he decided he was done with the nipple shield. I remember he pulled off, he looked at it, and then he grabbed it and he threw it as far away as he could. And then he latched himself back on. And from that moment on, we did not use the nipple shield for about a week. It was still extremely painful when he latched. But after a week, he kind of figured it out. So I don't know if he had maybe some tongue ties or maybe something going on with his latch. But we were successfully able to continue nursing. And he did not get teeth until, I think, 9 or 10 months. Did not bite me at all. So that was nice. So I kind of avoided that struggle. Even when he was eating solid foods, he loved his milk. We stayed on our routine, stayed on my routine with pumping at work. Didn't really have like major supply dips or anything. I think I got a stomach bug one time, but I didn't get super sick. And I did Greek yogurt, bone broth, things like that to make sure I stayed nourished myself. Always did electrolytes. One of my favorite things was an adrenal mocktail, which was orange juice, collagen powder, coconut water, and Himalayan salt. So all of those things together kind of makes you a little potassium sodium drink that's very good for keeping your electrolytes balanced. I never really took like a ton of supplements or anything, just like a prenatal vitamin and some, I think, sunflower lecithin and magnesium at night before bed just to help me sleep. And what else? Lots of protein, all the things. But I think for me, the biggest thing was just that routine. That's why I really kind of harp on that. And we made it to 12 months. And then after 12 months, I dropped a couple of pumping sessions. We dropped some bottles at daycare. And by 14 months, actual age, which would have been 12 months by his due date, we were down to just nursing him morning and night. And that was really nice. And we just kept going with that. Dropped the nighttime feed. And then finally at 15 months, we dropped the morning feed. And that was it. We were weaned. So that part was very smooth. So it was actually really a blessing. Like the start was really rocky and there were lots of reasons to give up. But the ending was amazing. And like if I had known what the ending would have been, I think I would have been like, yes, of course I can do this. But I didn't know. I didn't know that it was going to be so easy. And I have some theories on that. Like I really think that if you get through certain humps of breastfeeding, you can absolutely go to 12 months and beyond. And a lot of my guests have nursed their babies well beyond 12 months. So I think that 12-month milestone is really maybe not the milestone that we should have, because it's like if you hit a certain point, like you really can't go way beyond that. I think really some of the milestones, I think the first milestone is the first couple of weeks, because you're waiting for your milk to come in. And if there's any issues with weight gain or NICU or anything like that, those are definitely going to be threatening formula and threatening your breastfeeding journey. The second milestone to get through is transitioning back to work. That's usually between 3 and 6 months. So sometimes the transition back to work, it like starts out smooth and the next thing you know, milk supply goes down or something happens. Daycare says baby's hungry. Oh, we need more milk. Okay, now let's do some formula. An illness, being away from your baby, that milk starts to go down. And then I always hear moms say, well, it was better for my mental health to stop. And I really think, I have another theory on this. I really think that the better for your mental health is not that the breastfeeding or the pumping was bad for your mental health. I think it's the amount. Because if you are not making enough milk, it does wear on you mentally. But I don't think it's the mental weight of like, oh, I have to pump, or I have to nurse. I think it's the mental weight of feeling like you can't provide for your baby. And if you stop pumping and you switch to formula, then you feel like you are providing for your baby. And so, anyway, that's my theory. So I don't really think yes, it can be very hard on your mental health, but when people have a big supply and they're making enough milk, usually they don't say that necessarily. I think it's usually when you're making less milk and you see that amount in the bottle and you think, oh, I'm not making enough. This is bad for my mental health, because every time you pump, you're seeing that amount. You're seeing how small it is and you're seeing it go down and go down. That's, I think, what's really hard on the mental health. But for me, I would say, yeah, make it through that transition back to work. And then the last transition, I think, is just making it through baby switching to solids and just getting older. And so if they're like less interested, or they're switching to solids, or they're biting, or maybe get pregnant with another baby, like that's usually what happens, I think, between 9 and 12 months that can derail breastfeeding. But I think if you make it through all three of those struggles, you can absolutely go like to 2 years or whatever you want to do. So for me, I kind of made it through each of those. Didn't really struggle much once he was older. Like after 6 months, really no big milestone issues that we had to deal with. So yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any other tips that I had. Definitely when you're transitioning from the NICU is just keep in mind that your baby is unique, and if all the other babies in the hospital are being pumped up with formula and they're getting these big bottles, and maybe you get your baby home after like 1 week. Okay, a 1 week old doesn't need that much milk. So if the NICU is giving them a big bottle of formula, do they really need that? And could they be overfeeding them? And letting them kind of drive your supply by nursing them a lot when you get them out. If they are in for a longer time, like my son was, you can kind of get more established of like what amount exactly they need. So if they're in for 1 to 3 months, if you get out with a 3-month-old, it's going to be a lot easier to see how much they need and really make sure that you're building your supply to get up to what they need. So I'll have to see if I can get a guest on who had another NICU experience that they can share. But that's just like my word of warning is like the hospital's going to pump them up with formula. They add human milk fortifier to your breast milk. The human milk fortifier is nothing special. It's literally formula. It's called Neosure. It is nothing special, really. It's just formula. It's just like adding calories to your milk. And yes, you want your baby to gain weight, but trying to force them to unnaturally gain weight may not necessarily be the answer, and it may not necessarily be the healthiest. Like, they have a very underdeveloped gut. Your breast milk is perfectly tailored to their gut. So trying to cram them full of something to make them gain weight, do they really need that? I'm not saying that as medical advice. Like, go ahead and ask your pediatrician. But I asked my pediatrician, I was like, hey, does he really need that? Like, what are the ingredients in this? So we looked it up on Google, and it was like corn syrup and, all the things, which there's debates on whether or not that's like healthy or not. But it's just like asking my doctor, like, hey, does he really need this? And the doctor was like, no, I don't, and she was like, I don't really think he actually needs this. She was like, we're very concerned about our NICU babies, our premature babies gaining weight, but could that be at the cost of other aspects of their health that could affect them later on? We have chronic obesity and diabetes and childhood illnesses. And to hear her kind of admit that, this doctor had told me that she feeds her dog the healthiest natural diet. And yet she didn't even know what ingredients were in this product that they were giving my infant. So don't be afraid to ask your doctors. And one more story I'll share from our time in the NICU. We were in there for so long that by our last week there, we had just gotten like pretty chill being there, but some other babies had been admitted just a few days before we got out, and they were full term, but they were needing oxygen and lung support and everything. And these parents come in, and this family, the mom and dad are like across from us with their baby, and they just come in and they just sit there and stare at him, and they're not interacting with him. They're just staring at him. And we would come in and we'd be like, oh, hello, Owen, hello, sweet boy. And we would sing to him and read books to him. And when we left, we would pray over him and just, joyful and like engaging with our son and just trying to be joyful parents, even though we were struggling so much. But we would look over at that other couple and we saw ourselves. We saw what we had been through, and they would just sit and stare. And we, just every day we'd come in and we'd just do our thing, and we would say hi to them, and we ended up giving them a card and a gift card and things like that. Well, we noticed on our last day there, we saw them come in and they started talking to their baby. And I'm like, oh, hello, sweet boy. They start talking to him and interacting with him and just kind of coming alive. And it was just cool to see how we had impacted them and how we had kind of become just the expert parents in the NICU, just, besties with all the nurses, and had our favorite spot in our favorite chair, and just had become at home there and got to share that comfort with others. So that was just a cool story. And I feel like that's true of our parenting in general, is like, we've been through things, we've experienced hardships with breastfeeding and pumping and all these things, and yet I've been able to encourage other parents and encourage other people who've gone through those things. Like, I can't necessarily explain why this happened to me and why God why does this happen to my son? Like, I still think of that to this day. Like, yeah, he's so great now, he's so healthy now, he's so advanced, and he's just a wonderful kid. But why? Like, why did this have to happen? Why did he have to suffer? Why did he have to struggle? And I don't have answers on it, but if it wasn't for all of that, I don't think I would be such a passionate advocate of breastfeeding. I don't think I would have started this podcast. And so I'm thankful for that in a way. I like the phrase, thanking God for what he didn't do. And he didn't fix everything. He didn't fix everything up or make everything or rescue us necessarily from going through a hard time. Now, he did provide healing and safety and security through it all, but he didn't necessarily keep us from the hard times. And I think that he has made good come out of it and has allowed me to share my story with other people. So I'm very thankful for that, and thankful that I get to share about breastfeeding and just encourage people that it is possible to transition from exclusively pumping while your baby is away from you in the NICU to nursing, pumping, working full-time mom, all of it. It is possible, and I am living proof of that. So that is the episode, and that's my story. I will hopefully be sharing more, and if you guys would like to email me at breastfeedingdiaries@gmail.com, or you can follow me on Instagram at the Breastfeeding Diaries podcast, and engage with us. Let us know if you have any more stories, and we will see you on the next episode. Thank you so much.